Well, hi, welcome to Shadow Work Discussions, Week 10. My name is Rebecca Eigen. I am an astrologer in Houston, Texas. I specialize in relationships and especially in helping you own your shadow and bring the parts of you that are unconscious to consciousness so that you can share them in an equal way with a partner. Today I'm going to talk about a very unusual subject that is very complicated, and there's a lot to this subject, but I decided I wanted to share it because it's an interesting phenomena that happens in relationships a lot. In the mid-90s, I had a big dream, and the dream was that there was this boy who kept stealing my car. And I'd had the dream, it had recurred, so it had been happening over and over a period of time, but then I got a big dream. And the interesting thing about big dreams is that you remember every single detail and that it's like a story. And in this particular dream, this young boy who was stealing my car, I actually became his accomplice in the dream. And I woke up and I wrote it down. And at that time, I was also starting to study astrology. This is like the early 90s, because I found astrology in 85 and I found Jungian psychology in 1990. So in the early 90s, I was seeing the merging the two together and seeing the different disciplines as being very helpful to each other. And of course, after reading some of Liz Green's books, who is the world's most famous Jungian astrologer, probably the only one who has a diplomat, is a diplomat Jungian analyst. But at any rate, at that time when I was starting my studies, I ran into the book by Liz Green called The Dynamics of the Unconscious. And in that book, there is an entire chapter on the Puer aeternus, which is the Peter Pan, or Puella, as for the woman in all of us. And several people wrote books about it. Marie-Louise von France wrote this book, which is really thick, and it is it's an amazing study of this. And then there are several things like the flying boy and the Peter Pan syndrome and the wounded woman, because the wounded woman is, as I'll explain later, is the woman involved in this dance between the Peter Pan and the woman. And of course, the flying boy was Peter Pan, and the famous fairy tale of Peter Pan, who never wanted to come to the earth, who wanted to live in Never Never Land, and who had Wendy there waiting for him or helping him or whatever. It's like that entire fairy tale it's an archetypal predisposition that can be inside of different men and women. I'm like, not articulating very well today. Anyway, C.G. Jung, his work with the unconscious, of course, he posits that the psyche is made up of these archetypes, that there's an archetypal basis for everything. And in astrology, we can also see that as the signs and planets. And some of the archetypes that we've all heard of are divine child, earth mother, savior, wise old man, and the Puer Eternus is one of them. And so the Puer Eternus is an archetypal image that brings new ideas, new movements to the collective. And this image is the part of us that always lives in potential, that sees the potential in things, that embraces the new ideas, is very progressive. So you could say that right now our psyche is split in progressive ideas and then in Saturnian ideas, which are grounded, which want practicality, etc. And those two splits are what split all of us up in the psyche. And we all have to integrate both sides for balance and wholeness in proportion to each other. And to the degree that one side is split off, that's to the degree that the other side will be projected. So new movements, new works of art, new ideas are always being birthed by the collective and are very interesting to the psychology of the Puer. And you can see that he's dominant, and I'm going to talk here a lot about a boy, which can be a dominant theme in a man who has this complex, because this archetype is a complex that's in the psyche of a man or a woman, because when it's in the woman, it can be her animus that has this theme as well, that she's unconscious of. So they find each other through their energy, because everything, again, is in opposites, and also everything that's unconscious in us is going to be constellated outside of us. So this young boy can be alive and kicking in the unconscious of a woman as her own animus, contrasexual dimension of her psyche, which is what I found out when I wrote that dream down. And by the way, it stopped happening. As soon as I became conscious of it, I was able to make changes in my life, and also to recognize where this young boy had been stealing my car, what that meant for me. He was stealing my way through life. He was taking over my life instead of me being in the driver's seat. And the dreams started happening where I was driving my own car. So that was really helpful to have the unconscious give me that dream. So let's look at some of the themes that this eternal adolescent carries psychologically, because it isn't like something you completely get rid of. It's part of you. It's always going to be part of you, but you want to be in balance with it, and you want to be aware of it so that you know what it's doing. So one of the themes is not ever having to grow old and die the way the body does. He carries the image of our human longing for meaning and immortality. There's, desiring the guarantee that life is not mere biological existence and devoid of purpose. So that the Puer in all of us is longing to be free of actually growing old and dying. He wants to remain a child forever, and is usually a highly creative person, very charming, youthful, and talented and visionary. So these are some of the characteristics of the Puer boy or young man, who is an eternal adolescent. Although he can be a man, 40, 50, 60 years old, and still be a boy inside that is driving him. That complex can still be driving him. And he's usually very interesting and has a lot of interesting things to talk about. But because he wants to remain a child forever, he's usually questioning everything about tradition. And that's typical to all of us in our teens. And it is also typical of this part of our psyche, because we doubt that they're telling us the truth. So we go on a quest constantly for searching for the truth, for searching for the Holy Grail out there. And one of his central qualities is his elusiveness. He can't be pinned down, and he's always about to leave to go somewhere. So there's a restlessness to the person with this archetype dominant in their character. He wants to live forever because he doesn't see himself belonging to the earth. And as soon, there's a paradox. There's a paradox because at the same time, he wishes to remain elusive and unconfined. He also wants attention. He loves exhibiting himself and having an audience to find his ideas and his talents and his creativity. And he's almost genius. So a person can be very, very, very intelligent also. We have a person out in the on YouTube a lot, Jordan Peterson, who is strongly Puer in this way, in that he is very, very brilliant. He's bright and has very interesting ideas, and he's very articulate with words. Anyway, But as soon as they birth something, Peter Pan wants to move on to the next thing and the next and the next, never committing to making something permanent out of anything. And I'm not saying Jordan Peterson is stuck in the Puer consciousness. I think he has both the Senex and the Puer in his life because he's definitely become accomplished in his field. But I'm saying that he has that elusiveness, he has that brilliance, he has that questioning and that amazing articulate ability with words. So the divine child is the archetype of the Puer, and it embodies always potentials, potentials that have not arrived at yet. They only arrive at maturity, and therefore they're not fixed in space and time. So the Puer is involved in wanting limitless, undeveloped potentials, potentials that don't exist in the world of form because it never quite incarnates. Once something's been lived out, it will be subjected to limits. Saturn, it'll now be subjected to limits, and it will mature and become defined as something. So it can no longer be a potential. It can no longer be a possibility. And so there is this constant elusive state of becoming. And because this person is a child and an eternal adolescent, he's not yet become a man, and never will be, because he would no longer be a Puer. And he's clinging to childhood, and in particular to his mother. So this is someone who is still eternally a child. He is in the process of development forever. He is always at the beginning of something. And as soon as he embodies the enthusiasm and excitement for each new thing, and he has qualities of limitless visions, and everything has not yet become real to him in his real world. So he's constantly creating. He's very, very creative and very, very charming. So one of the things is that he doesn't like to stick around to see the end of things. So he never makes a company. He never hires employees or gets a place to give his ideas a home and a future, because then he would be grounded on the earth. And children don't like to have to grow up. They like to be able to use their vivid imaginations and just keep doing something else. So they're usually revolutionary and anti-authoritarian as well, and not wanting to be tied down to rules or limitations. So another image, and this is the one I want to particularly get to, is the image of the Don Juan or the Don Juana, if it's a woman. And this can be either sex that plays this role. And they want to live out a perpetual quest for the erotic, love well into their later years, and never quite finding him or her. And eventually the person they're with is just a mere mortal. So every person's, the projections will fall off. You will begin to see their faults, their flaws, their humanity, and you're either going to accept a real human being or you're not. And then you will go on to the next and the next and the next. And most relationships stay at that stage and never get grounded. And then if you have two people who are Puer-like, and they both want to be the star, that can't work, because the Puer wants an admiring audience, and he's actually interested in a woman who will be that admiring audience for him forever. He wants to be the star, the only star, so he can't share that very well with another person. And I found that really interesting. When I was rereading all of the notes that I had about the Puer from a long time ago. I mean, this was 1992 when I discovered all of this. It is really a kind of a mystical longing for the one who will sweep you off your feet, and you'll be in a constant high when you're with that person. But the result eventually, if you marry that person, will be disappointment when the actual physical partner is obtained, because you will start to see everything about them. And what I call the naked, what alchemists call the naked truth. It's like now you see who they really are, and they get to see who you really are. So there's no longer all that excitement. The new wears off. Marie-Louise von Franz wrote this book, and she talks about how this is really a mother-bound boy who is seeking the perfect woman who doesn't really exist except in their imagination. And they're more committed to their imagination and that perfect image that they have than they can be a real person. So every woman is just not quite the right one, although it always starts exciting. She's all right as a friend, but no, she's not the right one. I can't commit to her because there might be someone more perfect out there. And this can manifest internally as 4, 5, 6 marriages. I mean, I see these archetypes that are strong in certain people who've been married 3, 4, and 5 times. And they're never quite committed. So they're kind of immoral too. They're having affairs behind the other person's back, and they are also looking around to see what else better might come around. And so there's a flirtiness to them. There's a charming flirtiness to a person with this archetype strong. And it leads to living what's called a provisional life, where love and marriage take maturity, mortgages, evenings with in-laws, sick children, etc. Well, that is too much for them, and so they will fly off. This particular book, The Flying Boy, describes how this woundedness takes place in childhood and how this person has stayed at that particular stage of child development, and they have to heal that part of them. And that can be the male side of a woman, because if we constantly attract a flying boy, that can be that you also have that flying boy in you, and that you're still working on grounding him and being practical and learning to be Saturnian, responsible, etc. There is another thing about the flying boy or the Peter Pan, and that is that they are extremely romantic. I mean, they can draw people to them because of their amazing elusiveness and attractiveness. And it's interesting because it's a curious mixture of narcissism and evasiveness, yet highly idealistic in their outlook. So it's almost identical to introversion, because their libido is turned inward towards themselves. They are focused on how you're reflecting them instead of who are you. Who are you as an individual and as a person? And so wanting to be mirrored instead of related. And then there's guilt involved in that, because we feel guilty when we hurt other people, when we're not really relating to other people. And we leave a string of unhappy relationships behind us because we have not committed to the long-term process of making that relationship real and mature. And in every mature relationship, the projections eventually all fall off. It's not possible for it to be otherwise, because no one is going to always be perfect. What else? Living in that world of looking for that romantic ideal, the Puer person is also having this belief that they're never going to get old and die. They are immortal, and they're seeking immortality. So you actually see this a lot in the New Age movement. People who are very involved in the New Age movement are not practical. You know, they can be very impractical, and not really grounded in what they're doing. And it is interesting how they will attract somebody who is very grounded to handle all the bills, to take care of everything for them. So it ends up being a split between the mother and the father archetype too. Jung talked about this infantile narcissistic attitude as entitlement, because it embodies a certain kind of dependency, so that someone else has to be the breadwinner. Someone else has to be the caretaker. They're never willing to be responsible to anything long term. So there is this element of entitlement. And all this youthfulness wants to be special. So they're frequently impractical as well. It's a strong combination of idealism and impracticality, narcissism and entitlement. So they're always willing to leave you because their feeling nature is not very highly developed. And they can see that when they're leaving you that they're hurting a person, but they're gone. They're just on their way. Something else is down the road. Some other adventure is next. And they're suited to renting apartments, because then they don't have to be really responsible. They don't have to make decisions. They don't have to make mature decisions about how to keep a house going, how to be responsible or carry the weight of a company even. So they usually cannot stand on their own 2 feet. So they find a woman who's willing to be the father in the relationship. She's the grounded one, the responsible one. And they also have a fascination for danger, especially dangerous sports like mountain climbing, anything speed, like speeding, racing, anything to get off of gravity, to get off the earth, skiing, fancy skating, circus acrobatics, mountain climbing, parachuting, aviating. So the Puer's life is he's attracted to mountain peaks. And this brought to mind, John Denver, the famous musician who is extremely talented, who died in a plane crash. And he wrote the song Rocky Mountain High, and a lot of his songs are about eagles and flying, and he lived in that world of creativity. So there is a strong attraction to that, to mountain peaks. And their life is always somehow in the future. Whatever's happening right now is not the real thing. Now means death to the future. So if you're hurt when they leave, that's your problem. So they carry a lot of unconscious guilt because they let women down when they disappear, until it happens to them, and then the shoe is on the other foot. And then they attract the Puella, the woman that is exactly like them. And I think it's an opportunity to mature. And it's an opportunity to mature when it's happening when you go through it. I know that I was exactly like that for the longest time, and finally was able to see that love long term requires falling out of love, not being in love, actually, just loving a person for who they are, seeing the attributes of that person, their kindness, their generosity, their helpfulness, their willingness to meet you halfway, their character, and even their flaws, their temper, their, nastiness, sometimes their, whatever. It's like you get to see the whole person. But the Puer, the person who is still in the Puer consciousness, doesn't want to see the real person. He only wants an adoring admirer. That is what that person is there to reflect back to them. Reflect back to them who they are. Anyway, until the Senex becomes constellated, and the Senex is Saturn in astrology. It is the part of us that is all of us, that is grounded, responsible, that wants to create something in the world of form, that wants to accomplish our goals. The Senex in us is the wise old man archetypally. Linda Leonard wrote a book called The Wounded Woman. which corresponds to the adolescent boy. And this is a very comprehensive work as well that is really worth reading, because probably the wounded woman was raised by a puer man, a man who didn't really want to be in his home, who was always leaving, who was always having affairs, who was always flying off to the next woman, the next woman, the next woman. And so her father, if her father was like that, then that is a wound that is in her. So both of these people are wounded in their own way and have to work towards seeing how these opposites are inside us, how we have to be the one to ground ourselves, how we have to be the one to love ourselves and become our own mother and father and make our own decisions and be responsible for our own dilemmas, whatever we go through. So you can see in any relationship where one person is the perpetual adolescent and the other keeps the ground beneath their feet, what is unconscious in us is always going to be manifested in the other. So it's about looking at both sides. And a person with a lack of earth, particularly if there's a lot of air and fire predominant, is going to have this strongly in their character. I mean, it's just part of your fate. That's what I love about astrology, is that astrology can help you see what is part of your archetypal predisposition and what is part of your fate and what you can choose and make choices about to reach for the elements that are missing in you. Because like lack of water would be lack of feeling. The person would have lack of feeling. They don't care if they're hurting other people. Or not that they don't care, it's just that they don't feel it. They don't feel that's that important. Why are you hurting because I'm leaving again? Shouldn't be. You know, I always leave kind of attitude. So it can be like somebody with a very strong Saturn. Somebody with strong Saturn to the aspects to the sun or moon. Somebody with strong Capricorn. Can be very traditional and very paternalistic, but their shadow side is adolescent and chaotic and spiritually alive. You know, and then you can have the Gemini quality of elusiveness and youthfulness and ambiguous immorality. The shadow side of Gemini is rigid, structured, and deeply reflective. And then you also have another sign that can manifest this strongly is Jupiter and Sagittarius. Strong Sagittarius brings enlightenment, enthusiasm, and a strong provisional life, wanting everything to be someday. Someday I will write a book. Someday I will, do this or that. But it's never here. It's always sometime down the road. So a strongly Jupiterian or Sagittarian person can carry this. And I'm not talking about sun sign Saturn, sun sign Capricorn, sun sign Gemini, or sun sign Sagittarius, because that particular individual can have a lot of different things. We are all so completely unique. But I'm talking about where this is a dominant theme. There might be 3 to 4 planets in Gemini, Aquarius, Sagittarius, Capricorn, even Neptune and Pisces, because Neptune and Pisces are ethereal, elusive, not really here. Half the time they're in the other realms, in their imagination, in vision, in creativity, in music, in romance. So Neptune, and that's another whole part of this that she really goes into in the Puer Aeternus book, and so does Liz Green, about Jesus Christ, the Redeemer, the victim and the Savior, who cannot get old, who dies young. And there's a whole bunch of people who died young in myth, Orpheus and Mithras, and I don't remember all of them, but there's like 4 of people who died and they were resurrected in 3 days, and they were, they all died young. And so that was actually a myth that is a theme of this energy as well. And what it has to do with is getting off the earth. It's like getting away from Mother Earth. And internally, unconsciously, it can be running away, needing to be with Mother, and then also wanting to push her away. So lack of water can be projected onto an emotional partner because of the challenge with their lack of feeling. It has to be developed. When they are very afraid of their feelings and emotions, afraid to be overwhelmed by feeling, and so they deny their feelings, they project their feelings. You're the one that's overly emotional. You're the one that's overly demanding. And it's their own lack of development of that particular element. So how do we begin to heal this kind of internal split? I've just given you just barely what this is all about. It's very, very complex, and I could literally spend an entire week on it. But some of the values to incorporate, if we're willing to do the required work to create something in the world of form, then we can embrace our Saturn. And one of them would be hard work, consciousness, discipline, courage, decision making, self-valuation instead of perpetually seeking the mirror reflected glory from another person, direction and focus, knowing where we're headed and making something of your life, developing a stronger feeling nature. So those are some of the ways that you can bring this part of you into consciousness and work with it. Being willing to let go of compulsive perfectionism, accepting each other's weaknesses, faults, and flaws, replacing negative thoughts and constant criticism of the partner with positive ones, noticing what they do right, what they're acknowledging their efforts to please you, letting go of the tendency to project what you cannot see in yourself and others. That is a huge one. That's an ongoing discipline to look at what you do not like in other people and recognize that those qualities are in yourself. And then recognizing what you do like in other people, what they brought to you, the gift they brought to you. What that is something you can develop in yourself. And loving both sides, because they're both going to be there simultaneously. And it's having to balance these opposites where we become conscious. And that is the goal of life, is to become conscious. And astrology really comes in handy because you can understand each other better and you can recognize, okay, this is you, this is not me. And I accept that about you. I'm not going to change that about you. We're different, and accepting each other's differences. So opening our heart and our compassion to another person and to ourselves, because we're all growing. And I don't care how old you are. I don't care how many degrees in psychology you are. I don't care if you're already a full-fledged Jungian analyst. You're still growing just like we are. Everybody is growing and going through these changes of bringing more and more and more parts to consciousness. And I actually think it's fun, but I'm very Plutonian. So going into the underworld and coming back out is something I love to do, and I'm willing to do it with you. You know, if you're willing to go into your dark side and bring up your unconscious, I can guide you. I'm not saying I'm the most expert at it, but it's something that I love to do. So I can guide you in looking at what is in you that you're projecting onto the other person using your birth chart, because it's there. Whatever is there, those are our fate. Those are our archetypal predispositions. And this Puer Aeternus subject is so vast and so profound that I'm going to post on my website all the books that I've read, and I will put it under recommended reading. I will call it Puer Aeternus Related, so that you can, if you're interested in this study, because it is a very interesting study. So I'm going to say, that's enough for today. I'm going to thank you for coming, and I'm going to look on my computer to see if anybody has joined me and has any questions. Rebecca, it may be also the case that Puer woman can be raised by women whose animus is the Puer eternal too. Absolutely. Yes. Rebecca, have you seen The Matrix and Meaning of Character, an archetypal and developmental approach? It's amazing. Would strongly recommend. No, I will watch it. Sounds interesting. Awesome. Well, Claudia, it looks like you and I are the only ones here right now. So, thank you for coming. I appreciate you coming. And to anybody who comes later, again, always feel free to write to me. And I do consultations, 7 different kinds. And one of them is on Saturn. Just on Saturn alone, I can spend an entire hour, or actually 3 or 4, but really an hour, to hone in on your Saturn, your aspects to Saturn, and what that part of you wants of you. And also, if your moon or your sun are involved, I mean, that's going to be very important to you. And Saturn is the part of us that wants to grow up. And take care of ourselves. And like I said earlier, we all eventually, before we leave this planet, hopefully, will be our own mother and father inside of us, instead of looking for our mother or our father outside of us. But as Carla said, as Claudia said, this can be a woman whose animus is the one that is the Puer, that is raising you. Because if your father's gone, it's real possible too that he was a Puer and he took off. So this happens a lot early in marriage, where the father's gone. He's taken off, or the mother is the one that left and took off. So, yes, this is a very, very interesting study, and I highly recommend all these different books, and in particular for women, The Wounded Woman, and for men, The Flying Boy, because it's about healing that flying boy. So, let me look again. Hi, Patricia. Thank you. Yeah, it is very interesting. It's a very interesting subject. I mean, the dream that I had in 1992 was profound to me, because for the longest time, this young boy somebody was stealing my car. No, it was somebody stealing my car, and I didn't know who. Over and over and over. When you have a dream that repeats, that is the unconscious God, synonymous with God within, wanting to help you to see a part of you that is unconscious, that is split off, that is hurting you. And until I saw that in that dream, that I was the accomplice, I was helping him get away from the authorities. And we run out to my car. Finally, he and I both run out to my car, and here's my car, and I'm standing there, and he's standing there with me. And get this was phenomenal to me. I asked him his birthday because I was already studying astrology. And I went and looked up in the ephemeris, which is where the planets are all the time. I mean, we know where the planets are 250 years from now, to the day, to the minute, because it's mathematically precise. I looked up his planets. They were almost identical to mine. Really. I mean, it was amazing to me. He had the North Node in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo. He had the same energy I did. So I was amazed when I saw that. And that's what got me into, okay, I'm going to learn all I can about this. But it was a long time ago, and I just thought it would be a good time to bring this up again. It just kind of came back into my awareness in the last week, because I had another series of dreams. I don't know about y'all, but I record my dreams because they're amazing. And this past 2 weeks has been fantastic for dream work. So anyway, I will say goodbye. Thank you for coming. And next week we'll talk about something else. And if you have any questions at all, please contact me.